Greetings everyone, welcome back to the channel. Now today's video is not about party politics. This is not orange versus green. This is about governance, transparency and the direction Jamaica is heading. I want us to listen carefully to what Mark Golding, leader of the opposition, is saying here. Because whether you support PNP, GLP or neither, the issue he raises affects every Jamaican. So let's take this step by step, react to it, and talk about why this matters.
Greetings, Jamaica. Today I want to speak to you about some important issues of governance that are topical at the present time and that I'm finding troubling. There's a whole question of the bureaucracy and the integrity of Jamaica's civil service. Now, the position of permanent secretary is the senior position in the civil service in any ministry. It is a permanent post for the career of that person, that officer who's appointed. That's why it's called permanent secretary. That person runs the ministry from an administrative perspective, from government to government, whichever party forms the government. So it's very important, and it is the tradition and the convention in our system that permanent secretaries are independent, non-partisan, non-political, above reproach. Now, the permanent secretary in the Ministry of Energy, Telecommunications and Transport retired effective December last year. And a new person has been appointed as the permanent secretary. That person is Khadijah Campbell Rochester. Now, Mrs. Campbell Rochester formerly was in charge at the Constituency Development Fund unit within the Office of the Prime Minister. But she is somebody who has had a close association with an MP. In fact, the MP is Andrew Holness, Prime Minister. She was a director of his NGO, his non-profit, Positive Jamaica Foundation, which was called up in the Integrity Commission report on his affairs. She was also, I believe, a director of the West Central St. Andrew Trust, another NGO that he has in relation to his constituency. How can it be right that somebody that is so closely involved in the governance of the arrangements, or was so closely involved in the governance of the arrangements for somebody's constituency, being appointed a permanent secretary in the civil service? It doesn't look right to me, and I'm bringing it to your attention. Of course, there's a broader question of the wife of the head of government, the wife of the prime minister, being appointed the umpire of the affairs of parliament, the legislature, as speaker of the house. Again, how can that be right? The tradition in our system of government is that the speaker is an independent person. Even if they come from one side or the other, they are supposed to act impartially and independently to ensure even-handedness and fairness in the conduct of parliamentary affairs. How can it be right that the wife of the head of government, the prime minister's wife, is the umpire in parliament in the form of the speaker? We objected to this strongly when the decision was announced that she was going to be reappointed speaker after the last election. Despite our objections, the appointment went ahead. Again, it doesn't look right. It isn't really consistent with the way in which the Westminster system of democracy, which is what we adhere to, ought to function. The last point I want to address is this JPS $150 million loan. Now, we, all of us, want to see electricity restored to all Jamaicans as quickly as possible after Melissa. And I express my sympathies for anyone who is still without electricity. We had raised the question, though, because the minister came to Parliament in December and said that the funding required to restore the grid was 350 million US dollars at least. And yet the amount of money that the government was going to provide was 150 million US. Now, remember, the government's a 20% shareholder in JPS. The other 80% is owned by two overseas companies, Marubeni of Japan, East West Power of South Korea. They weren't putting any money up for the restoration because the minister had given a notice earlier in 2025 saying that their license was coming to an end and wouldn't be renewed in 2027. So they didn't have any security that they would still be in charge of Jamaica's electricity grid come 2027, and they weren't going to put up any money without any security. So the government was putting up money far beyond its 20%, but still at least $200 million less than the minister told us was needed to fix the grid. We asked him, how is it a good idea to put some funding in without knowing how the necessary amount would be reached and obtained? He never answered that question. I asked him again on Tuesday. Again, he dodged the question. And I'm saying a matter as fundamental as this, where government's resources, which is really the proceeds of the catastrophe bond, 150 million, has been lent to company JPS that Jamaica owns 20% of, in a scenario where we're told that the necessary resources to do the job is 350 million, so it's not even half of what's required. How is it a good idea to proceed without explaining how you're going to finance the full restoration project? Who is not going to have their light restored because the money can't stretch to what is needed? These questions have never been answered, despite how important this issue is to Jamaica at this time. Again, not good governance, people. We need to be vigilant. We need to stay on our toes because things are going in a direction that suggests that we have concerns that we must be vigilant about. Over to you.
So Mark Golding starts by reminding us of something very important: the role of a permanent secretary. A permanent secretary is not political. They don't change when governments change. They are supposed to be neutral, professional, and independent. That's the backbone of the civil service. Now the concern he raises is this: the newly appointed permanent secretary in the Ministry of Energy, Telecoms and Transport has had very close professional ties to the Prime Minister, including managing his NGO and being involved in constituency-related organizations. And here is the key phrase he uses: it doesn't look right. This isn't about whether the person is qualified. This is about perception, trust, and integrity. Because when the public starts to feel that senior civil service positions are becoming extensions of political offices, confidence in government erodes. And once you lose trust in the civil service, governance starts to weaken. Now this is where things get even more sensitive. Mark Golding raises the issue of the Prime Minister's wife serving as Speaker of the House. In the Westminster system, the Speaker is supposed to be umpire, neutral, independent, and fair to both sides. So the question is very simple: how can the wife of the head of government truly be seen as independent when she is ruling on parliamentary matters that directly affect her husband's administration? Even if she acts fairly, even if she follows the rules, the appearance of conflict alone is damaging. And that's the point he is making. Democracy doesn't just have to be fair. It has to look fair. Once again, he says, it doesn't look right. Now this part affects people directly, because this is about electricity, livelihoods, and recovery after Hurricane Melissa. We were told that 350 million US dollars was needed to fully restore the grid. But the government provided 150 million US dollars. Jamaica owns only 20% of GPS. The other 80% belongs to overseas companies. Those companies didn't put up money. And according to Golding, that's because their license may not be renewed after 2027. So they have no long-term security. Now here is the question that keeps getting dodged. And this is critical. Where is the remaining $200 million coming from? You can't start a restoration project knowing you don't have enough money to finish it. Especially when people's electricity, businesses, and medical needs are on the line. And Mark Golding says he asked this question multiple times and it was never answered. That's not a small oversight. That's a major governance failure. What ties all of this together is one thing: accountability. Appointments that blur the line between politics and administration. Parliamentary roles that appear conflicted. Massive public spending without clear explanations. These are not normal issues. These are warning signs. And whether you agree with Mark Golding or not, the questions he is asking are reasonable and deserve answers. This is where I want to talk directly to Jamaicans. You don't have to hate the government to ask questions. You don't have to support the opposition to demand transparency. Democracy only works when citizens pay attention. And that's why he ends by saying we need to stay vigilant. Because once standards slip, it's very hard to get them back. So I want to hear from you in the comments. Do these appointments concern you? Do you think the GPS loan was handled transparently? Or do you think this is being blown out of proportion? Let's talk respectfully. If you found this breakdown helpful, like the video, subscribe to the channel and share it so more people can hear and decide for themselves. Until next time, stay informed, stay vigilant.